There are many games throughout history considered to be revolutionary. The first generation of 3D-focused consoles really laid down the foundation for what was possible and inspired a plethora of titles in the future. When people often say what their favorite games were growing up, you'll typically find this game on the list. It's one of those games that's so popular, it's hard to find things to talk about that others haven't ever covered. But by golly, we're gonna find some things or die trying. Enough talking, and let's get into it. This is the Mysteries of the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Young items. This is something that always bothered me. Not being able to use the items I collected as a kid when we turn into an adult. Listen, I have no problem with the logic of, hey, these aren't strong enough for the things we take on as an adult. I mean, sure. Things like the slingshot make sense, we replace it with a bow. And maybe as a kid it's just harder for him to pull back the bow because of his smaller body. But things like the boomerang? The boomerang could still be used to stun enemies and things. And also, Deku sticks? Can't use them. They were helpful as like makeshift torches. Link gets a bit of magic and suddenly he's against practicality. There has to be a reason aside from game design, and I like to think there is. I think Link doesn't carry the items he had as a child because in combination with they aren't as effective logic, they add unnecessary weight to carry. If you have fire magic you can use anytime, why carry around sticks? And while young Link can carry the shields back as a kid, he arguably uses them effectively even back then. And although this wasn't really Link's decision, the wise sage just wants us to be strategic and smart about what Link is carrying. Bottled fairies. We all love to have a few spare fairies bottled up just in case we need them. They're good for healing when we're low on health, or even better when we lose all of our hearts. When we die, the fairy pops out of a bottle and swirls around reviving us. But who releases it? We clearly don't because, we're dying and focusing on our injury. This indicates that the fairy could have popped out at any time. So then, why do they allow us to capture them? Couldn't they just follow us like Navi? I can only think maybe they actually like being inside bottles. Colored tunics. Link starts the game with the classic green tunic on. This seems to be some sort of traditional wear of the Kokiri in the forest. But later on, as we go into different cultures, we find the Zora blue tunic and the Goron red tunic. All of these tunics are from these different races, but yet they all look the same as Link's tunic, just a different color. I believe the answer to this is based on the three goddesses, Din, Neru, and Furore. The goddess of power, wisdom, and courage, respectively. Each one can be seen in a flashback in the game, showing them as golden with hair down their back, giving the appearance of the hat Link wears. Each also has a different color scheme, though they look alike. So the tunics were made in honor of the goddesses, but the color is based on what goddess the culture or race seems to favor. Super strength. When Link acquired the gauntlets and their variations, he becomes so strong, he eventually can lift these entire stone pillars and toss them around. But have we actually analyzed Link's strength without the gauntlets? And even further, his strength even as a child? He is roughly the same size as the Kokiri, and right at the beginning you can see this Kokiri struggling to lift a boulder. Yeah, not a rock. That thing is giant. Link comes in and not only lifts it with ease, but can throw it like it's nothing. Not to mention when he acquired the Kokiri sword, he can swing it no problem any direction over and over and over without any training. Link is so strong even as a child. Could it be due to the lifestyle of living in a forest and being a Hylian? Perhaps Hylians have the potential to be really strong, but just don't really show it since most seem to be lazy like Talon. Grave writings. In the graveyard in Kakariko Village, we can enter the royal family's tomb. In it, we can see a melody, but also writing on the wall that reads, "This poem is dedicated to the memory of the dearly departed members of the royal family." But if you look close in the wall behind, this also has a texture that appears to be the same Hylian language. I tried to match up one line with the Hylian language translator from the Hyrule Historia that's on the Zelda wiki. It seemed to produce this. A-I-U-E-O-E Moku Hihi Sa-yo Su-hi-so. I have no idea what that means. The texture is also blurry, so it's hard to decipher, and it's possible I got a few wrong. But if someone really wants to dedicate some internet sleuthing to this, I would love to find out. Until then, the mystery of what this says remains. But I think we can take an educated guess and say maybe it's subscribe to Jiggylookback. Shark Prisoner? Probably one of the more straightforward things I wanted to mention because honestly, I'm not sure I ever really paid attention to it and I thought it was awesome. There's a fun little Easter egg that can be found in the Hylian Lakeside Laboratory. If you drop to the bottom of the water tank on one side, you'll see bars and a shark behind it. There doesn't really seem to be a reason for it, but my headcanon will be this is Snacker from Banjo-Kazooie being punished. Cucko Bimbo? The Cucko are essentially the chickens of the Zelda universe. They are always shown roaming on the ground, with the exception if you hit them enough they'll fly in from all directions and attack you. These birds can also be held above your head and used for gliding. This indicates that their wing strength is absolutely insane, strong enough to lift a person, including their own body weight. Yet, they are kept in these small gated areas which they actively escape. What is this woman thinking? She just cries about her birds escaping. Why don't you make a freaking cage instead of this 2-foot-high fence? Give me a break. The Poe Collector. I've seen people online speculating as to the identity of the Poe Collector. I've heard things like the boy from the graveyard or the happy mask salesman. Going into the same area as a child, we can talk to a guard who tells us things are boring and he wishes there was more trouble in the world. He tells us to break jars for fun. But if we go back at night, he tells us how ghosts are a hobby of his, and he likes to do research, saying you never know when that skill may come in handy. I think it's heavily implied that this is the Poe Collector and he was a former Hylian guard. Being in the same area, interested in ghosts, and having similar body types, I think this is a no-brainer. Though I do wonder what he's wearing on his face. Perhaps it's a lens of truth of some kind? The bottom of the well. In Kakariko Village, we can travel down the well and do this to find the lens of truth. It's needed to progress through the Shadow Temple. But once we traverse into the well, you'll notice it's not only really creepy, but appears to be some sort of torture chamber. We can find blood-stained walls and chains all over the place, not to mention empty coffins and monsters like the Dead Hand. It seems like a restless place for spirits. There used to be a man who lived above the well. Perhaps he had a secret. Or he fled because the Sheikah that lived there used this as their interrogation room and just had a tendency to be a bit too extreme. Either way, it's bizarre and creepy. Talking cows. Cows can be found throughout the game, at Lon Lon Ranch, in this random person's house, or a hole in the ground. But there is an even more curious detail. If you play upon a song in front of one of them, they will be so happy they'll give you milk. And they'll tell you that. These cows can talk. I believe there's a reason, and for that, you should totally go watch my theory video on the legend of Lon Lon Milk. I've dropped some strategic Hylian throughout this video. They're in the correct order and spell out a phrase. First person to comment that phrase gets the pinned comment. The link to the cipher is in the description. That's all I have for you. Be sure to drop a like in this video and subscribe if you haven't to catch my future uploads. Until next time, have a good one.
Jiggylookback!